Other thing that Nike teaches you is simplify. Just do less and do it incredibly well. And I think that is some of the best advice for every area of life. I think a lot of times we try to take on too much and we do end up doing everything mediocre. You have to embrace the suck. Things are going to be hard. Being an athlete, a full-time athlete, while being, I went to UC Berkeley, which is a very rigorous academic school, and having that full academic load, there are a lot of hard days and a lot of days you don't want to do what you know you have to do. It's all about growth. It's like we need to grow. But I think that the piece that was missing is for what purpose? Why do we need to grow? What if our main goal was to excel and provide the best level of service to our existing clients? What if that was our goal?
Welcome, everyone, to the High Performance Financial Advisor podcast. I'm Tony Bates. Today, I'm delighted to introduce a guest. Really excited by this one, actually. So, brings a unique blend of elite athletic discipline, corporate brand experience, deep financial planning expertise to her role as an advisor. Caroline Piehl is a certified financial planner, partner at TimeWise Financial, where she leads the Colorado office. And prior to moving into financial services, this is a really unique transfer, I think, which I'm really looking forward to get stuck into. Competed as a four-time NCAA champion swimmer, held leadership roles at brands like Nike and North Face, and today works with high-performing individuals, business owners, and current and former athletes to build proactive money habits and game plans for life transitions. Wow, that was a mouthful, wasn't it? That was a real mouth. Welcome, Caroline. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
What a background that is. So, I mean, there's a lot to get stuck into there. I love sports. I love Nike. I love North Face. I love financial planning. So you're a great guest to have on, basically, aren't you? So,
it's a perfect combination.
Yeah, absolutely. So So talk to me about this transition from athlete to advisor and that journey that you've been on there. And yeah, just explain some of that to us, really, because it's an unbelievable background, isn't it, really, for someone so young?
Yeah, I think, I've always been driven by following my passions, and I was an athlete at a very early age. And so, that just kind of led me to becoming a college athlete and competing, for one of the best teams in the country. And I was really trying to find an area where could I apply my skills as an athlete into the real world or into the corporate setting. And so, that's what led me to actually working in athletics or working for sport brands like Nike and North Face. And I do think, the skills you learn as an athlete are directly translatable to making you successful in the business world. And so, I was able to find success applying that work ethic, applying that teamwork skills that I learned, applying that leadership, and loved, working in that sports world, in that sports bubble for brands like Nike and North Face. And then ultimately, I kind of wanted to redefine myself, if you will. I've always been a finance brain. I've always been more of a numbers person. And so all of a sudden I found myself in a brand marketing meeting where we're talking about creative and copy. And I'm like, what am I doing? I think my skills and talents could be used elsewhere, because I always enjoyed more of the calculus statistics classes versus the writing classes in college. So, I had seen my dad grow up in the financial services industry. So I had a little bit of a preview of what that could look like, what skill sets usually translated well into the wealth management, financial planning industry. So I ended up just, taking the jump and taking that risk. I think that's the other thing that, athletes as well as high performers and business owners, they're very good at taking risks, right? It's not comfortable. It might not work out, but they take that jump anyways. And so I ended up taking that jump, getting fully licensed, all the credentials and designations that you need, and really haven't looked back since. It's been 5 years since I made that transition, and a lot has happened in those 5 years as well, a very accelerated timeline. But I really think athletes are athletes for life, and that mindset doesn't really go away. You're just applying it to a different discipline rather than to your actual sport.
Great. That's amazing. So obviously you competed at the highest levels in swimming, worked in major brands. So what are the key mindsets or habits that you mentioned that athletes have got that you've applied to the corporate world?
Yeah. I think there's a few things. Number one is, you have to embrace the suck. Things are going to be hard. Being an athlete, a full-time athlete, while being, I went to UC Berkeley, which is a very rigorous academic school, and having that full academic load, there are a lot of hard days and a lot of days you don't want to do what you have to do. And come to find, it's the same in the real world. It's the same. There's a lot of days where, you have to deal with difficult situations. You have to have hard conversations. Something doesn't go right. And you really have to kind of run headfirst into that storm. And I think being an athlete, that is so ingrained in who you are, because that's the reality of most days. You aren't going to feel great and you still have to put the work in. So I think that's number one, is just not being afraid of hard work, and being able to embrace that process. Number two is consistency. Kind of goes hand in hand with the first one, but just showing up every day, doing the right things, the right habits that will set you up for success in the future. For, being an athlete, just for an example, it's making sure you're getting to bed early, you're feeding your body with the right nutrition, you're doing a lot of that pre and post practice, stretching and rehab. And then obviously you're putting, your max effort in while you are training. All of those different things, if you are doing that on a consistent basis, even if you have bad days, you're putting a lot of that money in the bank for when you ultimately have that championship season and you need to take that withdrawal out. And so I think that is very applicable to high performers in the business world, especially in this industry, in the financial services industry, because a lot of what you put in is ultimately what you're going to get out as a financial advisor, especially if you own your own practice. And so I think that's critical mindset that really sets people apart, both in the athletic world and in the business world. And like I said, I think the last one is being able to take risks, being uncomfortable. And that's okay. Being comfortable, being uncomfortable, if you will, because that's a lot of where opportunity lies, is on the other side of that comfort zone. And so the more times you put yourself in those uncomfortable situations and you're able to navigate, I think the more confident you get and the more willing you are to put yourselves in those situations, which oftentimes leads to bigger opportunity on the other side. So I would say those are the three biggest things that really are parallels from the elite athlete mindset into, the business owner or a high performer in the business world.
Great. So high performing financial advisor, obviously you mentioned about some things about getting to bed early as an athlete, nutrition, warming up and warming down. I'm not sure would they apply to being a good financial advisor, getting an early night or what? So,
Yes.
But obviously more what you're saying there is process routine, isn't it? So
Correct.
what are your things as an advisor that is your training, is your nutrition, I guess, to make you as successful as an advisor as you were as an athlete? What are your non-negotiables is probably the question I'm asking.
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously you want to show up mentally right. You do want to still do some of those things, like taking care of your body, but I think way more so with a financial services firm. It's a lot of the less sexy side that I think is the most critical, right? Obviously you need a sound, competitive investment strategy, but that really is table stakes. That's table stakes for any advisor who has a wealth management practice. We have a tax practice as well, so that is a huge component of our process that sometimes is a little bit different. But I think really the backbone of what's important is the structure of your process and your procedures. Like I said, this is not stuff that you say, oh, I want to go in and own a business so I can create the best process and the best procedures. But really, that is what makes or breaks a firm, especially a high growth firm, because if you're growing quickly, it's very difficult to keep pace when you don't have a repeatable process and you need to hire someone on and it takes all of your time to train that person because you don't have any documented procedures or processes on how to handle, basic things in the business. And so I think that's really important. Number two is adapting and evolving. We are constantly reviewing our technology stack. There's so many new platforms out there. We're kind of hesitant to just throw on new tech all the time, but I do think it's important to test and pilot out different tech platforms that can make your practice more efficient or can be a value add to clients, a service that you weren't adding before. And so that's another area where I do think that routine of making sure that you are using the best of the best. And if there's something that you could be outsourcing to technology, we should be looking at that. And that is an ongoing process that never stops. That's every quarter we're looking at, what can we replace with technology that makes us more efficient. And so I think that's a huge one. And then data hygiene is very important. So keeping our data clean. We had a pretty big transition where we changed broker-dealers. And so making sure all your client data is updated, and making sure when you are doing any kind of transfer that you're tracking that data very clearly. Again, it's not really the sexy stuff, but it's doing the fundamental, simple things very well that make sure that your foundation is strong so that as you're growing and adding on additional households, you're not reaching that capacity because you've already done the heavy lifting at the bottom. And it also makes it a much better environment to bring in new staff. So I think a lot of those things are really important to being that high performing team overall. And then I'm a big proponent of, you should always be learning. Every morning, my first hour of my day is just reading what's happening. What are other firms doing that's catching attention? What's happening, obviously, in the market, in the world. But I'm doing a lot of research. I like to keep up with, what other firms are doing, as well as what's happening outside of the industry that is a different way we can look at things. So a lot of podcasts in the morning like this one, and just trying to stay sharp outside of just the financial services industry.
Amazing. So you've moved away from sports, but you've still kept that kind of routine, if you like, of good things. I guess the nutrition currently is digesting information rather than, the nutritional part, I guess, of being a successful advisor is information, right? Perhaps.
Yes.
So I think that people will love this podcast and your story, I guess, because the industry is short of, new entrants, younger, certainly from a female perspective as well. We know there's challenges there. It's something that everyone wants to, I think everyone is bought into. We need more diversity and we need more people into it, but there's a challenge. How did you come across being I guess I'm thinking you're an athlete, you're at Nike, you're at North Face, and then you go, I'm going to be a financial advisor. Like, what, I know you said your father was in it as well, but what was that process from going from Nike into financial advice, and how easy was it to enter the industry, I guess, to anyone that's looking to do so?
Yeah. I guess one helpful point would be I did major in finance at Cal Berkeley. Right. So I kind of thought that's where I was going to go right away.
Okay.
Life had other plans for me when I got a Nike internship as an athlete. That's the dream. So that was almost, in my mind, more of a detour for me. It ended up being a 5-year detour, so it was a bit longer than I had thought. But really, in the back of my mind, I always wanted, my dream was at the time, and still is to merge the worlds of finance and sport. And where do those two intersect? And so, those are definitely two areas of my passions. And so obviously the first 5 years was all in on the sports side, 0% on the finance side. But I learned such incredible, I would say, more soft skills, of how to work in a team, working in massive corporations like a Nike and a North Face. And in general, I kind of wanted to switch gears. I thought it would be easier to pivot, in my late 20s than in my late 30s. And so it was more of just a feeling of, I think I would regret this more in hindsight if I didn't make the leap than if I just stayed where I was. At the time, it was very much more comfortable to stay where I was and continue the norm of what I had been doing than to leave a incredible company, move back to Denver, which obviously I wanted to do, but to go from a very large, inspiring setting to a small business, was a huge kind of almost whiplash, if you will, where it was just such a massive shift overnight. The good thing is I know a lot of people who go back to do like a executive evening program at universities. You can study on the side while you have a different job. I think that's really important for career changers. It doesn't have to be this cut and dry. If you really are motivated and determined to make this change, you can be studying for, those exams after your full-time job in the other industry that you might be thinking about leaving, or you could use your weekends to study. And so that's what I did. I just started to, fill in my extra free time with getting the, Series 7, 63, 65, taking all of those exams. So I didn't feel like it was as drastic of a transition as it would have been if I just showed up day one with zero licenses under my belt. So I think that helped a little bit. It also showed that I was serious for the company that I joined, saying, hey, I'm doing this on my free time on the side while managing a full-time job in a separate industry. And that showed my hard work, dedication. People want to hire hard workers because you can teach a lot of the technical side of the business, but that work ethic, a lot of times, you have it or you don't, or it's more natural, or it's not. And so I think that also showed a lot of goodwill that I wasn't afraid of putting that work in. So there's ways to make that transition less jarring. But yes, that first 18 months, you go from being, feeling like you were doing really well in your career, and then you go to the bottom, you go to the beginning. I was starting, which I think is very valuable for everyone, especially if you want to be a CEO or own your own financial planning business, is you need to know the business from the ground up. So I learned how I started with opening accounts. I started with answering phones, so I knew what those questions were. So then I could help train, our staff now on, here are our top 10 questions we get. Here's how to navigate them. I learned more of the operations side of the business in the first few months. And then I shifted over to the advisor role, but I thought it was very valuable, but also very humbling, to go from being a senior brand manager to then, working on account opening paperwork and answering calls. But again, I think that just shows that you're serious about that career change and you're not afraid of hard work, and don't feel entitled that you have to jump to an advisor role right off the bat.
That's a really admirable, actually, isn't it? Going from a brand, I will ask you at some point about Nike. You say Nike, I say Nike, because I just want to know. But going from that brand ambassador at Nike and then starting at the bottom, how did you keep motivated and keep? Because I guess you used to winning, right? You've won lots of races. You've been the winner. You've been the best, and then suddenly you're opening accounts. How did you deal with that emotionally, and how did you manage to keep motivated? Because not many people, that's the strength, isn't it? It's easy to be good when you're winning, but when you're not, then that's when the hard work. So how did you cope with that, and what emotions were you feeling? Just to explain.
I think one thing that's very important is you have to find the right fit with a leader that believes in your potential. If I went to a firm where I was truly in an assistant or administrative role, and that was the vision they had for me, obviously that wouldn't work. I would be demotivated very quickly. But the firm that I joined very much saw a path to me being an advisor. But their philosophy, the firm that I now am a partner of, is you need to learn the business from the ground up. And so I knew I was on the advisor track, right? So I could see that that's where I was headed. But I respected that is where people start when they enter, especially when you're entering the industry. You need to start, to learn the business from the ground up. So I do think it's important that you have a leader, the firm that you're joining. There's a leader that believes in you, believes in your potential, is very clear on where you want to go. You're clear on where you want to go, but you're also communicating that. So I think that's really important because if you are stuck in a firm where you are in that paraplanner role or administrative role and you want to be an advisor and you guys are not seeing eye to eye there, or you're not on that career path, I think that is difficult because, I think it's harder to see that mobility. So that was very important to me, was maybe more of a non-traditional route where it was a quicker transition into that advisor role. But that's where I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I could see that I was going to be progressing in that direction. But that being said, it doesn't mean it wasn't difficult. But one thing that I tend to do is when I feel like I'm not at the level I want to be at, I try to take that into my own hands. What can I do outside of my job to kind of give me that leg up? And so obviously this industry, there's a lot of technical information that you need to know, especially on the planning side, financial planning, because it's taxes, it's estate planning, it's insurance. Obviously, investments is a huge part. And so I was like, I'm gonna get my CFP. So I did that right out of the gate. That took up a lot of time. That was a year of studying, taking exams, and then taking the final actual certification. So that was huge in giving me more confidence to have the knowledge in the industry, especially in that first year or two when I didn't feel like I was getting that on the job experience knowledge that I wanted to become that lead advisor. But I was going and getting it on and learning it on my own, which I think is very important. You have to take initiative to learn it on your own. Someone isn't going to sit down and teach you every single thing that you need to know. You have to do that on your own. You have to do the heavy lifting. Yeah. And then they'll teach you on the job in client meeting, how do you handle this situation? And so I went the self-study route of I'm going to credential up to try to kind of level up, my journey to becoming an advisor. So I feel like as long as I was pouring into investing in my education, investing in my knowledge, I felt like I was making progress on that journey. But it was definitely difficult for the first 6 months. There's no way around it. That's just how it was. But I tried to think that this is short term and this career pivot is for the next 30 years of my career. I can get through 6 months of feeling like I'm not exactly where I want to be.
Well done. So that's 5 years it's taking you to go from opening accounts to now partner, heading up the office. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, 5 years in the industry. Starting to work with clients was sitting in client meetings was about 6 months in. So it wasn't like I was doing that operations admin role for very long, but it did I was able to add value in those meetings because I could foresee what additional information we needed. It gave me something to own early on. And then I just started taking more advisor responsibilities, like in client meetings. I would be the one giving the economic update. And then eventually I would be the one leading the meeting and the lead advisor would just be there to kind of chime in. And then eventually the lead advisor would be out of the office and I would take the meeting. But that process of fully leading my own client meetings is it was a 3-year process for me, 2.5 to 3 years of fully leading client meetings on my own and having that confidence, the clients trusting me over that 3-year period to get to know me and my abilities. And so it is a process. These are very important, delicate relationships that we manage, and you're managing their most important asset that they have other than their health. And so it does take time. I think rushing those relationships is dangerous, because, you're looking at clients leaving if you rush that process too much.
I know you mentioned earlier, I really want to get stuck into that you're trying to mix finance and sport.
Yes.
So I'll really get stuck into that. But before we do, just what was it like working at Nike? You got to tell me, because it's the brand I love more than anything. So.
Yeah, Nike is like you are a kid in a candy store. I would imagine for everyone, truly, because people who love sport, it is the Mecca. And, they call it campus, which is outside of Portland, Oregon. It's in Beaverton. That's the world headquarters. And we used to call it campus because it was a college campus. You had to bike around to the different meetings because it's so large. And sport is just so ingrained in Nike's DNA. So it was very common to, you would have meetings all day, but you would block off lunch and you'd go do a class with people on your team. You're working out in the middle of the day. They have pickup basketball. They had a master's swim program. They had, Nike trainers teaching classes at all hours of the day. So it was very much a work hard, play hard environment where sport and being active is the red thread through it all. And it's a global brand. I mean, you say it's one of the most recognized brands in the world. And so, I got to travel to really cool places in Asia and Latin America, South America, and just see what sport is like in those different countries and try to grow sport participation. So it's definitely a very, very inspiring place. If you love sport, then it is really, I think, the dream place that you could work. It's very competitive. Imagine a lot of, high performers all in one place, looking for opportunities to grow. And it does become very competitive, but there's also just such a sense of team across the board. So I absolutely love my time there. I think, I worked with some of the smartest people I've ever met at Nike and attracted the best of the best. And I'm very grateful for my experience there. But if anyone is considering a sport brand, obviously Nike's probably already at the top of the list. I can confirm that it should stay at the top of your list.
Amazing. And what have you brought from those worlds into you're obviously leading an office now, right? So what have you brought from all those worlds, from sport, team?
Yes.
Because financial advice is very individual, but
yes,
there's team elements to everything we do in life, obviously. So I'm really keen to understand what you've brought into. You've told us what you've done for yourself in terms of what you brought from sport and business. What have you brought into your firm from Nike and from sport?
I'll talk more about what I learned from Nike. We talked a lot about, my individual traits or mindsets from an athlete to the business world, especially this financial planning world. But from Nike in particular, Nike is, I think, it's really known for its storytelling, right? You can have the best idea, but if you are not explaining it well to the audience, it doesn't matter. Nike cares and goes through meticulous detail to make sure that story is told in the most compelling way to inspire people. And the attention to detail that went through that process was a huge learning for me. And so I think that translates over to financial advising very well. One thing I learned, one of the biggest learning curves that I had was this business is a lot more like being a therapist than it is, being a stock trader or stock analyst. And so, a lot of what I do is I take these, it could be more complex, but to some people, taking, money concepts and trying to translate them in a way that is going to resonate with the person on the other side of the office from you or the desk from you. And so a lot of it is, how do I translate this in a way that they will understand based on who that person is and where they're at in their journey with money? And so a lot of that I learned from Nike is, who is your audience and how are they best going to digest this information? And that could change from one client meeting to the next. And so really less about me trying to prove what I know and saying it in the same way for every person, more about, okay, who is this person coming in? Where are they at with money? Do they care about the weeds and the details, or do they want more of an analogy? And so a lot of that is, how are you telling that story? I think that also comes into play a lot when you're prospecting and trying to grow your business, is what is your story? I think a lot of financial advisors are not great at building their brand and telling their story that's different. A lot of people say they're holistic financial planners and, a lot of the buzzwords that everyone is saying. And so how do we differentiate and create some separation? So a lot of that definitely learned at Nike. And then the other thing that Nike teaches you is simplify. Just do less and do it incredibly well. And I think that is some of the best advice for every area of life. Yeah. I think a lot of times we try to take on too much and we do end up doing everything mediocre. And so it really is ingrained in me to do less and do it exceptionally well and stick to it. We should not be changing or adding things in mid-year. We do strategic planning in Q4 every year to plan the following year, which that structure I definitely learned from Nike as well. But this is our strategic plan for the year. It fits within our 3-year plan for the firm. But this is what we're doing. These are our big goals for the firm. Here's how our teammates stack up to those goals. And we're going to measure each quarter. These are the initiatives that we are going to go after that will help us achieve those goals. And that's what we stick to for the year. We might be tweaking as we go, but we're not going to throw a big new project in the middle of the year, because this is what we said our priorities are, and this is what we're going to focus on to do really well for that year. So trying to avoid those squirrel moments where we're getting sidetracked to do this shiny thing over here and really focus on doing less things better, I think is a very valuable lesson for anyone to apply to their personal life or their business.
Fantastic. I love that. So I'm going to adapt that into my personal life and to my business life now as well. I genuinely, I was just thinking, it's really good advice. So the story that you're trying to achieve then, so I know you've got this vision, you just mentioned that you've got a story, bringing finance and wealth together. What are you doing and where are you trying to get to?
Yes. So TimeWise is our financial planning and wealth management firm. And then on the side, 2 years ago, I built a education-only company. It's called Win Your Wealth. And essentially, this is partly, the direction of merging the worlds of sport and finance. But also it's the goal is that it fills a very big void, a very big gap that we currently have, particularly in the US. And the goal of Win Your Wealth is to educate athletes about their money. So I provide financial literacy workshops to high school programs, collegiate athletic departments, and individual teams at the collegiate level, and then starting to dabble in some of the women's pro sports teams. And so the goal there is to educate these athletes about taxes, educate them about budgeting, educate about the power of investing over time, educate them about tracking where your money's going, where it's coming from and where it's going. And so the goal is to really start with an educational foundation and then to equip these athletes with the actual habits and tools they need to kind of automate a lot of this stuff, because especially collegiate athletes, they are competing, they're traveling, they're rehabbing, they're going to class, they're taking exams, to throw in, hey, here's a few $100,000 for this contract to play at this school for 1 year. Here you go. And expecting them to know what to do with that money, I think is unrealistic, because there are no financial literacy programs that are embedded at the high school level or the college level that are required for student athletes. So they're giving them this money, but then not really helping them with the structure of what to do with it and how to best steward that money. And so that's where I come in. I prefer smaller groups because then we can get more into specifics, but I like to do team sessions where I'm just educating on the basics of money and trying to, like I said, stand up those habits, introduce them to apps that can help track that stuff for them. Introduce them to automation where you're automatically moving money. Anytime money comes into your account, you're moving 30% over into a savings account to cover your tax bill. So just really breaking down, some of the misconceptions around money and trying to create tangible habits that these athletes can put into practice that is very low lift. And then the other key theme of Win Your Wealth that is different than another advisor or education program is all of the money concepts that I'm talking about. I am using some sort of sport analogy to explain that concept. So I think one issue we have is in the financial advising community is a lot of times, people, maybe it's more of the old wave of advisors. People are talking over their client's head more so to show what they know and not necessarily meeting that client in the middle. Yeah. And so especially with young adults, 18 to 22-year-olds, I want to make sure that they're understanding this material because it's very important. And so explaining these money concepts through the lens and through the language of sport is definitely a very important tenet of what Win Your Wealth is all about.
Amazing. And so when you're wealthy, is that something that you thought of, I guess, while you're an athlete? Are you seeing, I'm sure you've seen people get these amazing contracts, and I'm sure you've seen people getting in some difficulties when they shouldn't really be getting in difficulties. Is this something that burned deep in you from when you were an athlete and thought, I want to help these people if I can move into this? Is this kind of a passion that came about through lack of education or seeing people around you crumble or not crumble, but have financial difficulties due to an education?
Yes. I didn't come up with the idea while I was in college. It was more of a reflection back, especially with the start of the NIL era, the name, image, and likeness era, where athletes are getting paid. And some athletes, we're talking 7-figure checks. And so that is where the light bulb went off. It's like, okay, I have the knowledge and the skills to do this. There is a need. I am going to create and fill that void. And so that is when that idea came about. But also, as I was reflecting on my own journey as a student athlete, and now in the role that I'm in, especially knowing I was a finance major, I didn't know anything about taxes. When I had to do my taxes, I was like, how do we not learn this? Like, it is not clear. It is convoluted. Tax law is complicated. Like, we didn't learn anything about this. And I was a finance major. So I was like, all my friends in the other majors, there's no hope. There's no way they learned this. And so that was back then when times were simpler. I sound like I'm really old, but that was pre-NIL era where, it was simpler. You're not dealing with contracts and being paid as a subcontractor and having to carve out taxes and that sort of thing. Now it is much more complex. And so it really was just seeing this quickly evolving landscape of NIL, the lack of education, and then also reflecting on my own journey where I didn't even learn this stuff, and I was in the right major where you should theoretically be learning this, and I still didn't. And so that just confirms that this is a need. And I would say particularly, I really focus on women's teams and female athletes because number one, I walked in their shoes. I know exactly what it was like, being an athlete at the collegiate level. And number two, I think a lot of the financial advisors are going after men's football and men's basketball because those are the big ticket, high revenue items. And so I was very passionate about serving our female athlete base. And I think there's not enough female advisors. We briefly touched on this. And also just talking about my journey, like we're talking about on this podcast, is there is a pathway to, if you're interested in this career, there is a pathway into this industry. So that's where I've chosen to focus and where I'm passionate about.
Brilliant. Well done. A couple of things there, but what do you think the industry needs to do better to get more females, more diversity generally? The younger generation joining the industry, because it is a challenge. You read about the average age being, I think, 55, 56 of advisors, and this succession challenge that is across the advice space. From your experience as a young person compared to me and a female, what do you think the industry needs to do better, or firms need to do better to deal with that challenge?
Yeah. I think the first thing is acknowledging we have seen progress. So that's big. I think it's just like anything else. Typically, it's very hard to be something if you can't see it yourself. Having that role model of someone being a female business owner in this industry who is in their 60s. If I hadn't seen that, I think it would be much harder and people would be more hesitant to step into that industry. And so I'm lucky where, I know advisors where they started in the 60s and 70s and there was no one. They were the only female, the only person of color, the only Asian they were the only at the time. And now that is not the case. Now, I believe I was on a panel with the chairwoman of the CFP board earlier this year at a Invest in Women conference, and 24% of CFPs are female. That is high. It is quite a bit higher than the average of advisors that are female. So we're very proud of the progress, but clearly we want to work closer to a broader, diverse pool of CFPs. So I think acknowledging where we are now. And then the second thing is I think that there are going to need to be women that are stepping up in more of a leadership role saying, I really care about this. And I will say, from my experience being in those circles, especially in conferences that are mainly for female advisors, everyone is very passionate about bringing more women in. And I think that's very important, that everyone's kind of signing up in addition to just trying to grow their practice, is signing up to say, hey, I want to intentionally try to raise awareness for this type of profession, right? For example, when I was in business school, basically, they would say the three career paths coming out of business school are the ABCs. It's accounting, it's banking, like investment banking, and consulting. Those were the three buckets. Beyond that, there wasn't as many resources or employers coming on campus to talk to you. So I think, the fact that there's not a lot of visibility at the collegiate level of this being a career path right out of school, I think is where some work can be done across the board. But ultimately, I think I'm very encouraged. I think some people look at it as glass half full, glass half empty. I'm very much a glass half full I know my generation of advisors, male and female, we're all on the same page. We want the industry to become more diverse. I'm very optimistic about the millennial generation. I'm even more optimistic about the younger generations in kind of seeing a world where there is greater diversity across the board, but then especially within this profession. So I do think that change will come just with the advisors that are now going to be stepping into lead advisors and owning their own firms. I'm optimistic just because I think that mindset is shared across the board for the most part of really wanting to bring some broader diversity into the industry.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really good to hear. Actually, I didn't realize the stat on the CFP, but I think, like you say, there's definitely a lot of positivity. Everyone wants this change, and that's the most satisfying thing, that everyone wants the same thing. So we'll get there in the end. I think you've got an amazing story. So you've obviously, I'd imagine when you started swimming, based on what I've learned, even in just this time here, you'd have had a goal to get be a champion. Yeah, and you're working towards something. What does the future look like, and what are the goals that you've got for you and your business and for this business and athletes that you're working towards? Because I can guarantee that you've got a goal in mind. If you're able to share that, it'd be great to hear it.
Initially I wanted to say, I want to be on X number of campuses across the country. But in the last year, I've started to shift that because that is more broad impact, right? Yes, you're reaching more people. Yes, it looks cool from the outside because you're on all these campuses. But I've started to shift that where I think where the impact is actually made is going deeper with fewer partners. And so, for example, I was in a conversation with an ACC university, and we are going to pilot this for next year where, I'll come and do the financial literacy session as I have previously. But then beyond that, I will actually do tax preparation and a financial plan for every athlete on this women's basketball team. So I won't name the school, but that will be a model that I think creates deeper impact, where you are actually helping that person, not just in theory, not just conceptually, but you're actually pulling that through all the way to preparing the tax return and creating a financial plan for them so they know the exact steps they need to take. And so that, I think, is more of where I would like to go, because then ultimately it becomes a funnel into the clients that we serve day in and day out through TimeWise Financial. So I think that is where I would love to see that as a proof of concept go well, to where I could start to expand that, whether it's within the same school, through different sports programs beyond just basketball team. And then ultimately, if that means expanding to different schools, but I'm very hesitant and cautious that I want to go slow and do it really well, and build from there. And so I think that's the model that, I would love to see grow over the next 5 to 10 years is actually have, these student athletes become our TimeWise clients through wealth management and financial planning and tax preparation, rather than just have Win Your Wealth on the side as a financial literacy only.
Yeah.
And I'm giving them information, but then saying, okay, see you later, best of luck. I'm actually helping them walk through that journey together. So that's the vision I see for Win Your Wealth. And ultimately, having athletes make up a greater percentage of our TimeWise clients. I think that's the end goal for me, because I am so passionate about serving that audience. That would be, where I would want to take that and the role that Win Your Wealth plays within that space.
Amazing.
And then for TimeWise at large, I think in general, again, it's shifted quite a bit over the last 2 years. At first, it's all about growth. It's like, we need to grow, we need to grow, we need to grow. But I think that the piece that was missing is, for what purpose? Why do we need to grow? What if our main goal was to excel and provide the best level of service to our existing clients? What if that was our goal? Would we be proud and excited at the end of that year? And so I've really just started to shift my mindset around what's important and how should we define success? Because I think the industry as a whole is very cookie cutter, and success equals growth. Bringing in new assets, how much money you manage, what fees you're charging. And I find that to be a little bit, of burnout there and missing the purpose piece of it. And so I've really started to challenge the way that I think about that and how we frame that up as a team. And so, obviously we have growth goals, but it's not at what any means necessary. We also have very important service goals that I think are just as important as those growth goals. And then our last bucket of goals is around efficiency. And so, or optimizing our processes. And so our growth goal is just as important as our efficiency goal. And so a lot of that has to do with technology. What tech are we piloting? And so I think that's another area that I find just so fascinating, because it is changing so quickly, where I think we have a leg up because we're not afraid of implementing new technology, even if it doesn't work. So those are kind of how we bucket our 3 goals, but I'm being very transparent in how just the hierarchy of the goals has shifted, for me personally, but also what we pass down to our team about. It's not all about just growing. It's what's the purpose behind it and why.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's really, so when I set this podcast up, High Performance Financial Advisor, I love that philosophy, because high performance doesn't have to mean the amount of AUM you've got. It might mean that you are a good wife, husband, dad, whatever it may well be. So high performance doesn't, I guess that's the difference in sport and business, right? High performance in sport really does mean winning, doesn't it? Whereas in financial advice, it's personal, I guess, isn't it? Or
correct.
What performance is. So high performance doesn't always, in financial advice, to me, have to mean how much AUM you've got. Because if you've got more AUM than the next person, but they're happy outside of work and all those different things and fit and healthy, then who's the high performer, right? So I think that's the real. So it's really, I'm really glad you sort of ended on that. I think what you've done and the story you've got is amazing. I think there'll be lots of people out there that you'll be that person that are looking to, whether it's someone young breaking out, someone who's in another industry breaking. I think you're a great, you're a great leader or someone to look at, really, I suppose, for people coming in. So I really, really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story. I know there's lots we haven't got through anyway, but I think what you've done and what you've achieved and your mission and your vision and where you're going is commendable. So I'm looking forward to watching the rest of your journey.
Thank you. I appreciate all the kind words.
I do ask every guest at the end, what book would you recommend to any financial advisor looking to better themselves, change their mindset, whatever it may well be? Is there a book that you could recommend that helped with your performance?
Yes. I thought you were going to go client route or education route, which I would have gone a different direction, but more for the advisors themselves. The book called Grit. It's by Angela. I forget her last name, but Grit. It kind of goes along with the same theme of, being the mindset, right? The mindset that you have, especially as athletes, but really anyone. There's a lot of people that have a lot of grit and it has made them successful and they were never an athlete. So I don't want to make it sound like athletes are the superior breed by any means, but the book Grit, I think it's essential that you have that at some degree or are learning that and developing that skill, especially if you are owning your business as a financial advisor or have hopes to one day own that business. Because it is a wild roller coaster of a journey. There's great times and then there's periods where it just seems like everything is going wrong. And so that book, I think, has been comforting because it acknowledges that this is something that every single person experiences, and the more that you build that muscle, the more that it's easier to use it when you need it. And so that one I think is very relevant to financial advisors, particularly who own their practice.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on today. I know I think you're on, you're not working this week. So I know you've come on this podcast. So I really, really do appreciate that. And congratulations on your achievements. I'm looking forward to watching your continued achievements as we move forwards. Thank you so much for being a great guest, Caroline Piehl.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
And any guys, if you are listening, don't forget to like and subscribe. I have to say that because that's what all the influencers apparently do. So thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to High Performance Financial Advisor. If you found today's episode valuable, make sure you subscribed on your favourite podcast platform so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, keep performing.